Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I think we have something really special today because Bionda van Roosendaal will tell us something which is mostly seen as very difficult, expensive, and hard. It can be turned into something which will actually help to add value to your company. We will be talking about certification. Bionda has quite an impressive track record when it comes to ISO certification, auditing, quality in HSE management in the maritime and offshore industry. So you can really take a word for it that it hasn't to be a long and difficult process. She's currently working as General Manager at HSE at Heerema, and I'm really curious about her story. Bionda, please take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope so. Well, thanks for the introduction, Ashley. The target is high for this session, I reckon, because now hopefully it seems like I'm going to give you all the golden tools and the golden rules of how to go about ISO certification. I will do an attempt. I can't guarantee it, but I do know that there's ample time to ask any question that you may have after this session. And as Ashley introduced, I have been working in the Q and HSE field for quite some many years, in mainly maritime and offshore companies. And during those periods for those companies, I had to, well, at least had the fun part of chewing my way through ISO certification in various forms, meaning achieving certification, achieving recertification, rewriting entire manual management systems, that sort of thing. So am I experienced? Yeah, maybe I am. And I also must say I've done a lot of audits at different companies, meaning that I had the opportunity to sniff my way into how other companies do this in various forms, and also saw what actually works and what doesn't work. So I will hope to share the same, let's say, know-how that I gathered over the years here with you guys today. And as stated, I will answer any questions that you may have later. I hope you can all see my screen, but pretty much the topics of today, I kept it short and sweet by intention, so I do hope for some lively discussion afterwards. But basically, I will first focus on, let's say, the common misunderstandings about ISO certification. I think everybody is quite struck and in awe when they talk about ISO certification. I went to Google myself again to Google anything about what Wikipedia says about ISO, and you see a lot. And I can imagine that it's all very much overwhelming, and you have no clue where to start when you want to certify your company. So that will be the first part. Then, of course, the biggest question is why do it at all if it seems to be so hard? Well, I hopefully can explain to you very briefly why you should pursue it. And then I'll focus a bit on two most, let's say, core components of what is ISO certification, something called the context of your organization and the ISO high-level structure, which are two very terms that you often see when you dive into the deeper world of ISO certification. But then I think most importantly, I will end of what would be a good point for you as a company to start if you want to pursue ISO certification. The first part, common misunderstandings. I think you all kind of know them. One of which I think the most obvious one that people tend to reckon, yeah, but ISO certification means a bunch load of dusty manuals on a shelf that nobody reads, and it's an ominous and bureaucratic paper tiger, purple crocodiles. It's horrible. The fun part is nowadays it doesn't have to be. ISO thankfully has gone into the 21st century, and it doesn't mean you have to write everything down. Actually, by definition, it doesn't even state that you have to write a lot of things down. It does ask some other things though. So yes, ISO certification does not mean a fat dusty manual on the shelf. It's up to you to decide what you actually need. Another one that you often see is, yeah, but ISO will dictate how I need to run my business. It actually doesn't. It doesn't say that you need to run your business a certain way. It just gives you a set of tools that you should use to make sure that you can actually run your company in a better way. So it doesn't tell you, it's not a guidebook or a rule book or a law book stating thou shalt operate your company in this way. It's everything but that. It's you need to decide how you need to run your company, and you need to determine what tools you need to do that. And that kind of connects in, it will change my company culture, which it doesn't have to be, because pretty much what you want to have to do is to take that company culture that you cherish and formalize that into your management system. It actually is a toolkit to cherish that company culture that you so value, instead of actually dictating how you should run your company and changing your company culture as a negative side effect to that. I think also one which is pretty much, let's say, in the left corner there is, yeah, but it's totally not suitable for a small company. You know, I'm a small company. I have 3 people that work for this company. It's a massive exercise. It takes a lot of time, and it chews my way through resources that I pretty much don't have. It kind of relates to that topic. It doesn't have to be a fat, dusty manual. You can decide what you need to formalize in your processes, and even with 3 people, you can set up a basic management system that can work for you and actually can help you grow your business as well. And then I think the last one, which you often hear, is it will take a lot of time, a lot of money. You need to hire in a very expensive consultant, which takes a lot of time to formalize it for you. There's multitude ways how to get to ISO certification. If you don't make it too difficult for yourself, it doesn't have to take that long. You just need to know where those key points are that you need to focus on first, and then carry on with embedding that ISO certification process within your own company. Yeah, so these are, let's say, the 5 main reasons why usually companies say, nah, I'm not going to do it. But of course, there's a main reason why you actually should consider doing it. And I hope. So why certify at all? Well, various reasons to do it. Actually, the main reason, the main original intent by ISO or quality management certification was to improve the quality of your product and also your services. So that is one of the main key reasons of ISO certification, at least it was in the past. I think what it nowadays is, it actually focuses on you knowing who your key stakeholders are, how you need to manage those, and what you can do as a company to improve your service, your product, or whatever what your core business is, and also ensure that those clients of yours are satisfied and kept happy. It also asks of leadership, commitment, and engagement. I think that's one of the key roles too that is embedded in the ISO certification setup, is that it asks full contribution and active participation of the leadership within your company, and actually it gives tools how to do that and how to embed that. And in basis, it is, I think one of the most obvious reasons why companies do consider to go to ISO certification is, yeah, but the client will ask for it. Because usually, I think you've already been in a situation that you go out for a job, or you want to put your product on the market, and ask the question that you get back is, do you have ISO certification? And then it would be very great to be able to answer that question with yes. But the main essence is that is not the true reason. The reason why you should go for certification is because it can actually add value to your company. It can improve your processes. It can create some alignment, and can help you as a tool to prove to the outside world, when you go to my company for my service or my product, I can deliver a good product and a good service, and I have the track record and the certificate to prove it for you. So those, let's say, are the pros and cons in a nutshell. I think one of the important bits and pieces in ISO nowadays is something called the context of the organization. I hate this term, to be honest, because what does that say? What is the context of your organization? Put very flat, it's pretty simple. It is, okay, first of all, I provide a service, I provide a product. I have various stakeholders that I need to acknowledge, that I need to manage. That can, of course, one of the obvious ones are your clients. Another one would be your investors. But also, simply said, it's also your personnel and and your own people that you actually work with. You have various, let's say, stakeholders that you need to know of. The quality certification norm asks from you that you make an inventorization. Okay, who are those key interested parties or stakeholders that I need to keep happy, so to speak, when I'm working or providing the service at a company. That is one part of it. But it also, you need to make an inventory to determine, okay, now I have a set of, let's say, 6 stakeholders of banks and clients and personnel. What do I need to keep those people content, and what risks may I encounter when working for these stakeholders? But secondly to that, there are also many opportunities that may arise that you that can occur when working with those same stakeholders. What is actually asked from you is to make an inventorization of what are those key stakeholders, what are those key issues, and how can you make sure that you either be compliant, for example, if it's regarding to law, or how you can manage any risks or opportunities that reside from that. That is what you have to formalize in an improvement plan. And actually, that is the building bricks of your management system. In the old days of ISO, it actually was the other way around. You would start with a very dusty old manual, a management system manual or a quality management system or whatever you want to call it, and then would look towards, okay, to the outside world. It now forces you as a company to first look to the outside world, to formalize and think about what you actually need as basic tools and processes in place to manage that outside world. And that is what you use to formalize your management system. So it actually went 180 on us in the past decade. And I think it's thankfully because it fits more what you need with it. When you're doing any project, you first need to know who you're doing that project for and how you need to make sure that you deliver that project in the right way to satisfy, for example, the client, but also the other parties that are involved in that same project. So this is quite a big change in ISO the last, let's say, decade. Reversing the way you need to think about how to set up a management system in fall, and actually making it more fitting towards the outside world and towards your own small company, because it actually fits towards what you believe in as a company, but also will provide that service and that product that your client would want. Okay, when we talk about ISO as well, there's also a term that comes back very frequently. It's something called high-level structure. Something over the last years, a big change happened in ISO. In the past, there are many ISO certification norms available, but they didn't really or didn't necessarily align with one another, meaning it's very difficult to compare both, especially if you wanted to go to a integrated way of certifying your systems, not just for quality, but also for other management system standards. You kind of needed to search your way throughout the norm. That is something that has been standardized over the last years, and you now see a same set of breakdown in each ISO norm that you will grasp in your hand, and that is often referred to as the high-level structure, whereby the first, let's say, 3 sections are pretty much, let's say, introductory clauses, which provide some basic, let's say, terms and definitions and references. So some general info. I always say to any person that takes up the norm, you can skip the 3 first chapters. The important ones are the following ones, whereby you first start with that same thing, the context of your organization. So asking you to determine who are your key stakeholders, but also how you will manage them. A section on leadership, whereby it's actually providing a tool set of things you have to do, embedding that same leadership within your company. That consists of drafting setting up your core beliefs as part of a management policy, but also conducting frequent management reviews as well. Then it focuses on the subject of planning. It goes over to support, operation, evaluation of your performance, and the last bit, I think not even the most last but not least, is the section on improvement. But of course, it's very important how to continuously improve your company by chewing away through your lessons learned when providing services or projects in the past as well. Of course, there's a lot of sub parts under each individual section, providing some guidance on what you have to embed. But I've chosen not to go that in depth for this session today because I didn't want to get you render you asleep this early in the morning, because some of those, let's say, topics tend to be uh, not often understood very well, and seen as ominous and very bureaucratic ways of formalizing. But I think the important part is to note is when talking about all those subjects that you just see here, is that there is nowhere in entire ISO norm dictated that you should write anything down. However, it does ask you to ensure that those processes, those key themes, are managed uh, in a uniform way, basically. And how you formalize that is actually left up to you. You can decide as a company, how can I formalize this best? And that could be just as simply as part of a internet website, a folder structure somewhere on it on a file server, but simply said also on a couple of flowcharts. As long as it provides you as a company sufficient guidance to ensure you tick off all those, let's say, subtopics that you see here, your context of your organization, leadership, planning, support operation, etc., within your business. And no, that doesn't mean creating 500 procedures. If you don't need 500 procedures, but just one, then the one is just fine enough as well. They don't do a tally of the amount of procedures that you actually do create. They just want, when a certifier comes, they just want to have some reassurance that you are managing your process in the right way, conform the various subjects within the ISO certification norm. Now, I think probably the thing that you've worked, okay, now I'm a company and I want to start ISO certification. So where to start? Is actually not as complex as it seems to be. At least I can say that because maybe I've done it a little bit too often. But in the basis, the first part, the most important part, is to get the buy-in from management, but also from the personnel, your staff, because you will need those to actually do this. Because if what I've often have seen in companies is that a person becomes responsible for ISO certification, and that person has to do everything. I've been in that situation myself a couple of times as well, but I can write any procedure or I can come forward with any process that I think is a good fit. But who am I to dictate how you should do your work? So you actually need that other person. If that person is responsible, let's say, for the commercial process of your company, then you need that person to draft up that uniform way of working, because I don't do that job. The other person does that. So getting the buy-in from both your management and everybody that works there is very important, because you actually need them, and you need to involve them when actually setting up a system that actually will conform to ISO certification. Once you actually get that and you get that support, it's very important to treat ISO certification as a project. So you need to create a project plan, and you need to make an inventorization. Okay, when taking the norm, and if you haven't done it so whether do an ISO certification type training, because it will provide you more intel what the key ingredients of the norm are, is that you conduct a gap analysis of where you stand as a company today. And thankfully, there are a lot of self-assessment questionnaires available online. Any major certifying body provides a toolkit that you could use as a small company and just run through each theme individually and determine where are those gaps that you still need to bridge. And that is what you can actually use to go into the next step, which is actually determining those processes, but also determining which of those key processes are key and which need to be formalized in one form or another, and which are, let's say, lesser of importance. And when I step in a company, especially with new companies, I always say, okay, first of all, always start with mapping out that business process. What do you do as a company? What are your key processes that you need to deliver that product or that service? And make it as simple as it can be. I've often used the very simple ones. Okay, first you have a tender, then you get a contract award, then you do a project preparation, then you execute the project, then you close down the project and have some lessons learned, and then it repeats itself. Make it as simple and flat as it can be, because that you can use as, say, the coat hanger, the capstock, where you can connect all your other processes to. And that also helps you to determine that context of your organization. Who are those key stakeholders that you need to keep content? What are the risks that you potentially run as a company? So where do I need to formalize those key procedures and processes on? And you see an exclamation mark. I placed that there on purpose because, as I said before, formalizing those processes, it doesn't have to be a manual. I actually recommend not making a manual because that is something that will create dust on the shelf and will not be used. Think of a solution, a tool, or anything that you can think of that actually works for your own company and for your people. It only asks that everybody can work in a uniform way when delivering your service or product. And of course, after all of that has been created, you need to implement it, because when you actually do decide to go for certification, there will be auditors visiting your company and they will ask to anybody, okay, what do you know of your management system? Do you know how to conduct this bit of work? Are you all familiar with this? So it is important that people are well aware of what you formalized in your management system. And of course, when you've got that far, is very simple. You can get certified. But as you see, I actually added a big or, because getting certified is a thing in itself. You need to find a certifying body that actually fits with your company. So I do recommend, when you actually go to that step to go for ISO certification, search around in the field of certifying bodies, because I've worked with various different bodies and they all work in a slightly different way. And it's good to feel if it matches with your company as well, and wants to support you in the route that you're going to take, and that it matches, rather than um, uh, um, uh, not providing that added value that you should get out of it. And so it's very important to go about it as a normal, let's say, tender process. Put the request out with various certifying bodies, and get a feeling of how they will deliver that certifying service. But, and that's the or, is you can also make a decision of not pursuing ISO certification. Why? Because it is an investment. It's not for free. My experience, what I've also seen, if you as a company can conform your clients to state, okay, I've set up my management system conform the norm, but I haven't chosen to certify it. I've seen that very often that has helped, is accepted as well. If you can prove that you've ticked off and you followed the norms and embedded that within your company structures, sometimes it's not even necessary to pursue that certificate. So especially with a smaller company, I say, okay, just start with shaping your management system in the way of ISO certification and what ISO 9001 will request from you, and determine later if getting that certificate is added value or not. Um, well, at least I put the example of the company that I'm working for is Heerema Marine Contractors. Aside from the quality management standard, of course, there are also two other management system standards which are often certified. A lot of companies choose to go for all three rather than just the one. It depends also very much on what type of service product you actually deliver. Um, the distinct difference between ISO 14001, which is a standard for environmental management, is it actually asks from you as a company to make an inventorization of your environmental aspects and impacts. So the impact that you have as a company on the environment. And the second bit that is distinctly different than from 9001 is the embedment of your life cycle perspective, pretty much the cradle to grave principle. You need to have proof within your company how you manage that process. The other one is ISO 45001. It was previously called OSHA's 18001. And that is the management standard that actually focuses on occupational health and safety management, which of course is translated in Dutch to the ARBO type related standard. It has a lot of similarities, and it focuses on how you manage your health and safety risks within your company, and also focus a lot on workers' participation and engagement. So those are two, let's say, subjects which are distinctly different in that norm as well. And it's up to you to decide what fits your company to expand that or not. And it seems that I've been speaking way longer than I intended. But that was the end of my brief chat. So fire away if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bionda. Are there any questions? If so, you can also unmute yourself and just share them with us. Karel, I was expecting you.
Hi, Bionda. Nice to
Hi.
thanks for your presentation. I do have some questions for sure. Some of them you already partly answered actually further down the presentation. Well, let's start with this one. You say you should see which certification body matches the company. Do you see indeed like different standards somehow that they adhere to judge whether or not your company should be certified or not? And is that a very subjective process? Yeah. To start with, actually, that's what I get a little bit from the
What I have seen is in the basis certifying bodies, well, they are certified as well, so they need to actually conform and verify competence of companies according to a set of ground rules, which they have to do. So in basis, they will all deliver the same service, but the way how they do that, I've seen distinct differences between different companies. And I've also personally have various experience with companies which I just didn't match what we wanted to pursue as a company. And I give you an example when I was working for Smith Terminals, where we went for multi-site certification. We wanted to certify a lot of different locations worldwide over one system. But there were about 21 locations worldwide in different stages, and we needed to implement the systems individually in each area. And we distinctly went to search for a certifying body which acknowledged that we could start first with the main office with 3 locations and then add on new locations as we went along. And there are certifying bodies which just don't want to do that. So it's triggering what you need as a company and finding the best partner that will help you. And what you see, different certifying bodies have different experiences. So if you, as a, let's say, engineering company, go towards a certifying body which is very well versed in auditing petrochemical factories, you can imagine that they will ask different questions when they do an audit. So you need to match and see. And also, it's not only the certifying body, but it's even the auditor that they will connect to you as well. Has that auditor, does that person have the right, let's say, skill set and experience to add value towards your company as well? And it is a bit, let's say, subjective sometimes because it is a person and people have different, let's say, focus areas and they will come forward during their audits as well.
Yeah, you had some remarks that made me think like about it can be like you said, for example, one guidance rule for your business to complete the process can also be 500 rules that you need to set up or draft. I'm not sure if the range is indeed in practice so broad, or maybe there's some more similarities between companies. Yeah, for us, we think about DNVGL as certifying body. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have experience with that specific one. I think it's a very common
I
one.
do.
Maritime business. So, yeah, not sure if you can say something specific about them. Whether or not it would be a good idea to start up with DNVGL.
It's very difficult. Let's say my experience with DNV were not that positive, but it also had to do for various other reasons. Okay. DNV provides a good service, they could provide a good certification, and let's say in the situation that I was working with DNV, there was a mismatch, and that's also due to the way we managed to work at Heerema, also so to speak, versus what they could deliver. And DNV is renowned. If you have a certificate of DNV, they'll be you can flash that in the face of the clients, no worries. So that they are warranted to provide you with a guarantee. I think the trigger, what you need to find within DNV is find that lead auditor that can help you instead of work against you. And you're the client, so you can dictate, okay, that person that you've now put forward, I don't feel assured, I have a mismatch with that person. Can you come forward with a different partner from DNV? And they will do that for you.
Okay,
I think that
this possibility is there to
should be a happy marriage, so to speak.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for your answer.
Okay.
Nope.
Hi there. It's not questions, that's just some points that I've just picked up and something that might help. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, the ISO process, and you'll probably find, due to some experience I've had, that companies are already subconsciously doing that. You know, they do identify their key stakeholders, their key clients, you know, with regards to the, you know, context of the organization. So the word may sound, oh, it's not a lot of work, but a lot of companies are already doing that. So it's about grabbing all those processes and what the good things that they're doing and bringing them into the standard requirements. And that plan, do, check, act is the important thing that Bionda has mentioned. Best way to start is probably just do a gap analysis on the requirements of the standard and see where you are and what you're doing. And I think that's a good start for everybody. But yeah, you probably find out, it's my experience, that you go in and a lot of companies are subconsciously already doing a lot of the requirements. You know, it's basic good management.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there are any other questions, yes.
If there's room for, is there time for question? Then I have some more. It's okay.
Yeah, for me it's okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Shoot.
Well, the one other question that I had is, like, you said you have experienced quite some of these certification processes in various companies. Have you been involved also with startups going through this process? And if so, do you know if these standards, like the 45,001, or especially that one, actually makes sense for a startup, or maybe it's actually very easy even for a startup, because everyone is very much involved, so to say, with a small number.
I would recommend to start with quality management first, because someone is asking me to join. I will go for ISO certification for 9001 first, because the other two norms do require you to do and deliver some things which create a little bit of additional burden. So I would always opt to go for 9000 first, and then later online both environmental and occupational health and safety a bit later. Because then you already have your base, you have your assurance that that bit of 9001 is covered and certified, and then expanding that with the other norms is relatively easy, rather than doing that in one go. Okay,
thanks. Then I had an additional question that came from one of my colleagues. Actually, we had a talk before this wake-up call on this. We use GitLab for software issue tracking and development. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this system. Maybe if not, then the question is irrelevant. But if you would be familiar with the system, yeah, we would. The question here was, would that be one of the systems that can be yeah, put forward as the kind of process alignment for tracking issues, solving issues, and somehow tracking also lessons learned from projects?
I don't know the system, but on the basis the answer is very easy. Yes, it doesn't matter if you have a software system that provides you bits and pieces of your ISO certification norm. Then having that system, using that uniformly, is sufficient. You don't need a signed process determining how you manage that, because you have your system, which you can show during your audit that you actually operated this way to track those issues, and also track those lessons learned and how you conform and follow them up. So it doesn't really matter in what kind of system you actually have that formalized.
Then my last question would be, again, asking for your experience with these processes. Is there anything to say about how much time this roughly costs to go through this process? Maybe also in like lead time and yeah, involvement. Is there anything to say about that, or is it?
It depends very much of how active you will pursue and do it. Meaning that if, for example, you say, I will clean sweep the schedule for, let's say, the next couple of weeks, and we'll all focus to lock ourselves in a room to set up this raamwerk, this framework, it can be relatively quick. But if you don't have a resource available to do that focusedly in a period, yeah, it will take several months. Especially for a relatively small company with not a very complex business process, it can take between a month and 3 to 4 months easily. But then you need to have some dedication, and you need to have the support of the people, let's say, owning that processes, because you need those to actually map that process as well.
Clear.
And I think my own experience, we reshuffled an entire management system for Smith terminals, and that took us with 2 people 6 months. But then we went from scratch and built everything up from the beginning again. But we were full-time allocated on that. And of course, then after that, the process starts finding your certifying body, having a document review, and getting it actually formally certified. But that actually connects after that, those months.
So clearly, highly depending on the size of the company as well, and the complexity.
On the size, the scope, how many things you need to formalize, and yeah, that's highly dependent on that.
Okay. Well, thanks for your estimate, at least for like a small company, how much would be roughly probably for us. It's good to know. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Go to the hay, lock yourself in, and 4 weeks you're done.
That's good. All right.
Okay, thank you. I think you're going to wrap it up. Thank you for your interesting story, Bionda, and Karel, thank you for your questions. I think quite interesting to have a wake-up call like this. I think Bionda, if you're okay with it, if there are any questions afterwards, I can put them in contact with you if you're okay with it. And yeah, well, thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks for the opportunity. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Hey, bye-bye.